right, you are listening to One Life Radio. This is Bernadette with my honey, Alan North, and, of course, Crystal on the controls, and Dr. Jonny Bowden, a.k.a. the Rogue Nutritionist. He's the author of several books. The latest is The Great Cholesterol Myth, and you can find him at www.johnnybowden.com. Jonny, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I just love talking with you. You are a wealth of information about helping us all to navigate through the nutrition, fitness world that we all seem to find ourselves living in now, trying to just have a healthier life, to take care of our own health, take it in our own hands.
Well, thank you so much. That's kind of the purpose of all of it. That's what we get up in the morning to do, to empower people to kind of be the captain of their own health team. That's how I put it.
Oh, I love it. I love that. So today you want to talk about forbidden foods that you can eat. Let's talk about that.
So, that's a great fat. Now, here's another fat that's been maligned, like coconut oil and palm oil. These are fabulous fats. I recently discovered Malaysian palm oil. I'll tell you the story with palm oil. Palm oil is one of those fats that, your conservatives at the American Dietetic Association would tell you not to eat. Don't eat coconut oil. I'll tell you a funny story about coconut oil. I was on Dr. Oz's radio show a few years ago, before he had the TV show. He had a radio show on the Oprah Network, and I was on for an hour. It was a few years ago. And Mike Roizen, who is his partner, the other guy that, writes the U books with Mehmet Oz, he was on by satellite. And I was talking, 150 Healthy Foods on Earth had just come out, and I was talking about coconut and coconut oil and saying how great it was. And Roizen pipes in on the ISDN line and says, oh, you're out of your mind. This stuff is this horrible stuff for you. It's saturated fat. It does all these bad things, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, 2 years later, Dr. Oz is featuring coconut oil as a superfood on his website and on his show, and I feel very personally gratified that he's come around to this. So a lot of these saturated fats got very bad reputations for various reasons. Palm oil is a good example because the original palm oil that they used to import into this country was a mess. It had lots of trans fats, and it was at a time when saturated fat was completely demonized. And then it also suffered from the fact that palm oil in many countries is not very sustainable because they really deforest the areas to get to the palm trees. And so it's just, was not considered a good oil. Now you discover that something like Malaysian palm oil, which is so pure, and in fact, if you look at it, it's red. And why is it red? Because it's so loaded with antioxidants, like carotenoids, from which the beta-carotene and alpha-carotene, they all come from that family. So rich in antioxidants. And in Malaysia, and the reason I always push Malaysian palm oil is because that country is so environmentally advanced, and they are so caring about the forestation. They have set aside areas that are, protected, and the industry is sustainable. So when you get palm oil from Malaysia, you've got none of the downsides. The oil's fantastic, and you don't have to have any environmental guilt because it's sustainable. So these are great oils. And, one of the reasons we're so sick, in my humble opinion, since you're giving me the platform to talk about this, is, we talked about inflammation, and I consider that in the book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, we talk about inflammation as one of the four major promoters of heart disease. One of the reasons we are so inflamed with our diet is that in this craze to reduce our saturated fat consumption, we switched to vegetable oil. So every restaurant in America now fries in canola oil and soybean oil and sunflower oil and cottonseed oil and all of these highly processed omega-6 oils. Well, we need omega-6 in the diet, but it needs to be balanced with omega-3. We need a 1-to-1 ratio. We're getting a 16-to-1 ratio. The research says it's 16-to-1 in favor of omega-6s. Why does that matter? Because omega-6s are inflammatory.
Well, I have to ask you...
when we got rid of our saturated fat, we substituted a very inflammatory oil, which is now you can't shake a stick without hitting 50 products in the grocery store that are made with corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil. We get too much omega-6.
Well, Dr. Bowden, you're one of the top nutritionists in the world. What is your opinion about canola oil?
I think it stinks. I wouldn't have it in my house.
There you go.
My friend Fred Pescatore, MD, who used to be the medical director at Atkins, he has one of the best essays I've ever seen on cooking oils in one of his books. And at the end of his section on canola oil, he says, I won't have it in the house. I just think it's a really If you read some of the descriptions of what has to happen to make it actually comes from a plant called the rapeseed plant, and in order to make that palatable, what they have to do to it chemically in terms of high heat, in terms of solvents and degumming and all of the other stuff they have to do, it just makes it a very I just think it's a triumph of commercialism and marketing over any kind of real science or health.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Going back to palm oil, I mean, if you substitute some of these vegetable oils with some of the old traditional saturated fats that they replaced, you would probably be righting some of that balance between inflammation and anti-inflammation. I mean, something like Malaysian palm oil contains tocotrienols, which have been found to protect the brain against stroke damage. I mean, those are fractions of vitamin E.
Wow.
Very rich oil with a lot of good stuff, and it doesn't increase inflammation, and that's one of the most important things we can do.
Well, how do you incorporate Malaysian palm oil in your diet? And then I want to talk about sugar before we go off the air, what we can do about sugar cravings. But how do you incorporate the Malaysian red palm oil in your diet?
I've been lucky enough to find some, straight, direct palm oil that I can actually use for cooking. And I mix my oils a lot when I saute or if I cook. I may use some butter with some olive oil. I may use some Malaysian palm oil, even sometimes with some butter. Sometimes I'll use it alone. But it's also found in a lot of products. Some that I'm not, a great fan of, like, Nutella, which is delicious, but, probably way too high in sugar. But the thing that is important is a lot of people look at these ingredients and they go, oh, palm oil, I can't eat that, that's bad. No! Much worse is when you see hydrogenated soybean oil and when you see tons of corn oil and canola oil, way worse. So don't avoid something because it's got palm oil in it this is a very healthy oil.